So today we will conclude our reading of Srimad Bhagavatam. As mentioned earlier, Canto 10 is the longest canto in Srimad Bhagavatam. It has nothing but the pastimes of Lord Shri Krishna. And I was actually listening this afternoon, since it was Srila Prabhupada's appearance day. A lot of Prabhupada's disciples who reside in Vrindavan and some who are visiting Vrindavan for Janmashtami were glorifying Srila Prabhupada today. They were glorifying their spiritual master. And one of Prabhupada's disciples, Sarvabhauma Prabhu, who is actually by profession a hematologist, but somehow also manages to preach. He travels around the world to preach, and primarily he preaches in Pakistan. And he was talking about what does Nandotsav mean and what actually happened on Nandotsav. You see, Lord Krishna appeared at midnight. Nobody was awake to celebrate his appearance. But after he gets transferred to Gokul, then Nanda Maharaj celebrates his arrival in a very grand fashion. And that day, the day after Janmashtami, is called Nandotsav. And that's the appearance day of Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada was born on Nandotsav. So every year, the day that is celebrated as Nandotsav is celebrated by ISKCON devotees as Vyasa Puja, because that is the appearance day of our founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada. And Srila Prabhupada's disciple was saying, what did Nanda Maharaj do to celebrate his son, the appearance of his son? Well, he gave away almost everything in charity. And he was saying how every day Nandotsav is being celebrated in some universe or the other, because Lord Krishna is always appearing in every universe on a daily basis. And how 125 years ago, Nanda Maharaj decided to send Srila Prabhupada to us. Last year was the 125th birth anniversary of our dear Srila Prabhupada, of course, which is being celebrated even this year. So which concluded yesterday for us. So how fortunate we are to be in the vicinity, proximity, in terms of history, in the presence of a great Acharya like Srila Prabhupada. So Lord Krishna is so kind that he's always sending his representatives to guide us back to him if he cannot make his appearance every day, every minute, every second of our lives. So I thought that was a beautiful mood that Nanda Maharaj, in the mood of charity, gave away almost everything. And he decided 125 years ago, he would give us Srila Prabhupada, a pure devotee and an eternal associate of Shri Shri Radha Krishna. to help us along. So in that mood of Prabhupada's appearance day, we will go back a few hours and see how Lord Krishna actually makes his appearance. So we're going to be reading from chapter 3, Canto 10 of Srimad Bhagavatam. So as we're reading, some of the shlokas I will explain, others are self-explanatory. So text 1 to 5. So the first 5 shlokas together. So last time, Archit Prabhu had talked about what is called the Garbhastuti. While the Lord was occupying the womb of Mother Devaki, the demigods appear there to offer their glorifications, to offer their prayers, to offer their veneration to the Supreme Lord. So the demigods have left. So what's happened after the demigods left? After they are done with their prayers? Thereafter, at the auspicious time for the appearance of the Lord, the entire universe was surcharged with all the qualities of goodness, beauty, and peace. The constellation Rohini appeared, as did stars like Ashwini. The sun, the moon, and the other stars and planets were very peaceful. All directions appeared extremely pleasing, and the beautiful stars twinkled in the cloudless sky. Decorated with towns, villages, mines, and pasturing grounds, the earth seemed all auspicious. The rivers flowed with clear water, and the lakes and vast reservoirs, full of lilies and lotuses, were extraordinarily beautiful. In the trees and green plants, full of flowers and leaves, pleasing to the eyes, birds like cuckoos and swarms of bees began chanting with sweet voices for the sake of the demigods. A pure breeze began to blow, pleasing the sense of touch and bearing the aroma of flowers. And when the Brahmanas engaging in ritualistic ceremonies ignited their fires, according to Vedic principles, the fires burned steadily, undisturbed by the breeze. Thus, when the birthless Lord Vishnu, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, was about to appear, the saints and Brahmanas, who had always been disturbed by demons like Kamsa and his men, felt peace within the core of their hearts. And kettle drums simultaneously vibrated from the upper planetary system. Srila Prabhupada writes in the purport to this particular shloka, when the Lord has to appear himself, everything on the planet is perfect. There is peace, there is happiness. Everything coordinates to welcome the arrival of the Lord. The Kinnaras and Gandharvas began to sing auspicious songs. The Siddhas and Charanas offered auspicious prayers. And the Vidyadharis, along with the Apsaras, began to dance in jubilation. The demigods and great saintly persons showered flowers in a joyous mood, and clouds gathered in the sky and very mildly thundered, making sounds like those of the ocean's waves. Then the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vishnu, who is situated in the core of everyone's heart, appeared from the heart of Devaki in the dense darkness of night like the full moon rising on the eastern horizon, because Devaki was of the same category as Sri Krishna. Srila Prabhupada explains in the shloka that it is actually Ashtami. It is the waning moon. How did suddenly the moon become full? It was actually a full moon, although it was Ashtami. So Srila Prabhupada writes that Acharyas have explained that when the Lord appears, everything is perfect. Everything is organized in such a way that all of Prakriti and material nature is also ready to glorify the Lord. And one way to glorify the Lord when you're happy about the appearance of the Lord is to be blooming, is to be bright, is to be resplendent. One more reason that the Acharyas give as to why the moon was suddenly like a full moon on this night, although it was Ashtami, is that the moon was so pleased that Lord Krishna was appearing in the Chandravamsha dynasty and feeling thoroughly pleased, the moon became full. What does this mean at the end of the sentence where it says, because Devaki was of the same category as Sri Krishna? This does not mean that Devaki is Sri Krishna. It simply means that Lord Sri Krishna is Satchidananda, and so is Devaki Satchidananda. So this statement is to be taken on the spiritual platform and not on the bodily platform. Vasudeva then saw the newborn child who had very wonderful lotus-like eyes and who bore in his 4 hands the 4 weapons, Shankha, Chakra, Gadha, and Padma. On his chest was the mark of Sri Vatsa, and on his neck the brilliant Kaustuba gem. Dressed in yellow, his body blackish like a dense cloud, his scattered hair fully grown, and his helmet and earrings sparkling uncommonly with the valuable gem Vaidurya. The child, decorated with a brilliant belt, armlets, bangles, and other ornaments, appeared very wonderful. In our experience, children come into this world naked. The Lord came fully dressed with all of his paraphernalia. There is a deeper explanation as to why the Lord comes in this form. We will discover that shortly. On his chest was the mark of Srivatsa. There is 32 different meanings to what is the Srivatsa. But the commonly accepted understanding of the Srivatsa, it is like a mole on the body. It is like a marking on the body of the Lord, on the transcendental body of the Lord. This transcendental marking called Srivatsa is in the form of an equilateral triangle. And on the deities that we see of Lord Vishnu, within that Srivatsa is Lakshmi Devi. Another meaning of the word Srivatsa is a tuft of white hair. So depending on which acharya is in which mood, the word Srivatsa is defined differently. The word Srivatsa, Sri meaning Srimati Lakshmi Devi. Vatsa means beloved. So the Lord is the beloved of Lakshmi Devi, and hence he is called Srivatsa. And of course, on his neck is the brilliant Kaustuba gem. So the Lord comes fully adorned to let Devaki and Vasudev know that he is the Supreme Lord. He is no ordinary child. When Vasudev saw his extraordinary son, his eyes were struck with wonder. In transcendental jubilation, he mentally collected 10,000 cows and distributed them among the Brahmanas as a transcendental festival. How does one celebrate the appearance of one's son if the parents are in jail? So generally, Kshatriyas celebrate the appearance of their son by offering charity. But because Vasudeva was in prison, he had to do this mentally. And Srila Prabhupada writes a beautiful sentence in the purport. I will just read it out. If one cannot serve externally the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one can serve the Lord within one's mind, since the activities of the mind are as good as those of the other senses. Even in the Bhagavad Gita, the Lord refers to the mind as one of the senses. So if one cannot use one's eyes, one's nose, and other aspects of one's body to celebrate, you can celebrate mentally. You can offer charity mentally if it's not possible for you to do it physically. Even that is accepted by the Lord. O Maharaj Parikshit, so Shukadev Goswami speaking now. O Maharaj Parikshit, descendant of King Bharata, Vasudeva could understand that this child was the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Narayana. Having concluded this without a doubt, he became fearless. Bowing down with folded hands and concentrating his attention, he began to offer prayers to the child, who illuminated his birthplace by his natural influence. So in the dark jail, when the Lord appears, it becomes bright inside that dark jail. So Srila Prabhupada writes in this purport that Vasudeva is experiencing two simultaneous emotions. One is that of a parent who's welcoming his newborn child. And the other is the parent who recognizes that this child is not an ordinary child. It is Lord Narayana himself. So on the one hand, he, the Lord, is the object of his affection because the Lord is in the form of a child. But on the other hand, he also becomes the object of worship. And he does these two things simultaneously. So now we're going to read Vasudeva's prayers that he's offering to Lord Narayana, who's made his appearance in his four-handed form. Vasudeva said, "My Lord, you are the Supreme Person, beyond material existence, and you are the Super Soul. Your form can be perceived by transcendental knowledge, by which you can be understood as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. I now understand your position perfectly. My Lord, you are the same person who in the beginning created this material world by his personal external energy. After the creation of this world of three gunas, sattva, rajas, and tamas, you appear to have entered it, although in fact you have not. So here, Vasudeva is telling the Lord, you have created this entire material universe. The predominant qualities of this material universe are the three gunas. And you have created something that you have entered into. But you are beyond these three gunas. The Mahat Tattva, the total material energy, is undivided. But because of the material modes of nature, it appears to separate into earth, water, fire, air, and ether. Because of the living energy, Jiva Bhuta, these separated energies combine to make the cosmic manifestation visible. But in fact, before the creation of the cosmos, the total energy is already present. Therefore, the total material energy never actually enters the creation. Similarly, although you are perceived by our senses because of your presence, you cannot be perceived by the senses, nor experienced by the mind or words. Avan manasa gochara. With our senses, we can perceive some things, but not everything. For example, we can use our eyes to see, but not to taste. Consequently, you are beyond perception by the senses. Although in touch with the modes of material nature, you are unaffected by them. You are the prime factor in everything, the all-pervading, undivided Supersoul. For you, therefore, there is no external or internal. You never entered the womb of Devaki. Rather, you existed there already. So, Vasudeva is telling the Lord, my dear Lord, this is not a regular birth for you. You have always existed in the heart of Devaki as Paramatma. And you are just making your appearance now. There is a little bit of philosophy here in the first few sentences about whether material energy is divided or not. And is it our perception of it being divided? We will not get into the philosophy so that we don't get lost in the Harikatha. So I will save the philosophy for another day. One who considers his visible body, which is a product of the three modes of nature, to be independent of the soul, is unaware of the basis of existence, and therefore he is a rascal. This is Vasudeva still speaking. Those who are learned have rejected this conclusion because one can understand through full discussion that with no basis in soul, the visible body and senses would be insubstantial. Nonetheless, although his conclusion has been rejected, a foolish person considers it a reality. So what Vasudeva is saying in these two shlokas, 17 and 18, that there is a difference between the body and the soul. Some people accept only the body. Some people accept only the soul. And Vasudeva will go on to say that in reality, the body comes from Krishna, the soul also comes from Krishna. Both are real. So he is calling those individuals as fools who think the body to be independent of the soul. Oh my Lord, learned Vedic scholars conclude that the creation, maintenance, and annihilation of the entire cosmic manifestation are performed by you, who are free from endeavor, unaffected by the modes of material nature, and changeless in your spiritual situation. There are no contradictions in you, who are the supreme personality of Godhead, Parabrahman. Because the three modes of material nature, sattva, rajas, and tamas, are under your control, everything takes place automatically. My Lord, your form is transcendental to the three modes, yet for the maintenance of the three worlds, you assume the white color of Vishnu in goodness for creation, which is surrounded by the quality of passion. You appear reddish, and at the end, when there is a need for annihilation, which is surrounded by ignorance, you appear blackish. So coming back to these 17, 18, and 19, Prabhupada gives a reference to Shloka 4 from the 7th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, where the Lord says, Bhumirapo nalo vayuhu khammano buddhirevacha ahankara iti yamme bhinna prakritirashthada. So the Lord is telling Arjuna here, earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and false ego. Altogether, these 8 constitute my separated material energies. Ashtadha, these 8, bhinna, separated, prakritihi, energies. So, in reference to these 3 colors that Vasudeva is speaking about, Lord Vishnu, because he is associated with the mode of goodness, is the color white. Lord Brahma, who represents the quality of passion, is the color red. And Lord Shiva, who represents Tamogun, is blackish. So how do we interpret this? Because we know Vishnu is black and Shiva is white. So Prabhupada writes that when we read this particular shloka, it is just a representation. It does not mean that Vishnu is the color white. It does not mean that Shiva is the color black or that Lord Brahma is the color red. It's just the representation of these 3 gunas. Goodness is represented by white, passion is represented by red, and ignorance is represented by black. O my Lord, proprietor of all creation, you have now appeared in my house, desiring to protect this world. I am sure that you will kill all the armies that are moving all over the world under the leadership of politicians who are dressed as Kshatriya rulers, but who are factually demons. They must be killed by you for the protection of the innocent public. So Vasudeva is criticizing Kamsa, who's wearing the garb of a Kshatriya, but in reality is a demon because of the way he's conducted himself, because of the way he's treated his role of a king. So Srila Prabhupada writes some wonderful purport to it, correlating with the fact that in today's time, almost every ruler is actually a demon. And they're creating a lot of problems for the rest of us in society because you have politicians fighting among themselves. I am talking about what Prabhupada has written in the purport. We have rulers who are really not rulers. We have politicians who are fighting for power and prestige and wealth and fame. And therefore, they are factually demons. And what is Vasudeva telling the Lord? They must be killed by you for the protection of the innocent public. O my Lord, Lord of the demigods, after hearing the prophecy that you would take birth in our home and kill him, this uncivilized Kamsa killed so many of your elder brothers. As soon as he hears from his lieutenants that you have appeared, he will immediately come with weapons to kill you. So here is the exhibition of Vasudeva feeling fear for his young child, even though on the one hand he knows it's the Supreme Personality of God. He still feels if he finds out he's going to kill you, even though he has heard that the eighth son will kill Kamsa. So on the one hand, he's venerating the Lord. On the other hand, he's saying, I'm afraid that this is not going to go well. He will kill you. He's such an Ashura. Shukadev Goswami continued. Thereafter, having seen that her child had all the symptoms of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Devaki, who was very much afraid of Kamsa and unusually astonished, began to offer prayers to the Lord. Devaki was observing the Lord's appearance, and she is also experiencing this dual emotion of, is this the Supreme Lord or is this my child? And therefore she begins to offer her prayers. Sri Devaki said, my dear Lord, there are different Vedas, some of which describe you as unperceivable through words and the mind. Yet, you are the origin of the entire cosmic manifestation. You are Brahman, the greatest of everything, full of effulgence like the sun. You have no material cause. You are free from change and deviation, and you have no material desires. Thus, the Vedas say that you are the substance. Therefore, my Lord, you are directly the origin of all Vedic statements. And by understanding you, one gradually understands everything. You are different from the light of Brahman and Paramatma. Yet, you are not different from them. Everything emanates from you. Indeed, you are the cause of all causes, Lord Vishnu, the light of all transcendental knowledge. After millions of years at the time of cosmic annihilation, when everything manifested and unmanifested is annihilated by the force of time, the five gross elements enter into the subtle conception, and the manifested categories enter into the unmanifested substance. At that time, you alone remain, and you are known as Ananta Sheshanag. So, Srila Prabhupada writes in the purport, I think we have discussed this before as well, of how Lord Krishna expands into Balaram, then Balaram into the Chaturvyuha. From that comes Narayan, from that the second Chaturvyuha, and from that comes Lord Vishnu. So when Brahma also has to give up his life, at that time, total annihilation takes place. So everything goes back into the body of Lord Vishnu. And Vishnu in turn goes back, and everything gets wrapped up until the only person left to serve the Lord is Ananta Shesha, which is Lord Balaram. On inaugurator of the material energy, this wonderful creation works under the control of powerful time, which is divided into seconds, minutes, hours, and years. This element of time, which extends for many millions of years, is but another form of Lord Vishnu. For your pastimes, you act as the control of time, but you are the reservoir of all good fortune. Let me offer my full surrender unto your Lordship. Srila Prabhupada writes here, in our material world, our concept of time is dictated by the movement of the sun. The days, the months, the years, etc. So time is controlling us. So one of the words for the sun is Savita. So the word used in one of the shlokas is Savita here. Savita means sun. Time controls us. But who controls time? Lord Vishnu controls time. And therefore, Lord Vishnu is beyond time. No one in this material world has become free from the four principles: birth, death, old age, and disease, even by fleeing to various planets. But now that you have appeared, my Lord, death is fleeing in fear of you. And the living entities, having obtained shelter at your lotus feet by your mercy, are sleeping in full mental peace. If you read the purports of this particular shloka, it is becoming very clear that those who are not devotees of Lord Vishnu are fleeing in fear. But those who have taken the shelter of Lord Vishnu have nothing to fear. In this particular purport, Srila Prabhupada references Shloka 4 from chapter 9, where the Lord says, Maya tatam idam sarvam jagadavyakta murtina matsthani sarva bhutani na chaham teshvavastitha. Okay. By me in my unmanifested form, this entire universe is pervaded. All beings are in me, but I am not in them. So the Lord is present here in this universe, but at the same time, he is aloof from the material universe. One of the other shlokas that Srila Prabhupada references is the 16th shloka from the 8th chapter, where the Lord is telling Arjuna, Abrahma bhuvana lokaha punaravartinorjuna mamupetya tu kaunteya punarjanmana vidyate. The same message that we are reading in that current shloka is appearing in shloka 16 of chapter 8 of the Bhagavad Gita, where the Lord is telling Arjuna, from the highest planet in the material world down to the lowest, all are places of misery wherein repeated birth and death take place. But one who attains to my abode, O son of Kunti, never takes birth again. So how does one attain the abode of the Lord? You can mentally attain the abode of the Lord just by practicing Krishna consciousness. One doesn't have to physically go to Goloka Vrindavan, although that will be the ultimate destination for us. Nevertheless, just practicing Krishna consciousness itself means you are already on the transcendental platform. So therefore, you have nothing to worry about. But those who have not surrendered to Vishnu have a lot to worry about. My Lord, because you dispel all the fear of your devotees, I request you to save us and give us protection from the terrible fear of Kamsa. Your form as Vishnu, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is appreciated by yogis in meditation. Please make this form invisible to those who see with material eyes. So, Mother Devaki is telling Lord Vishnu, the yogis meditate on you as Paramatma, the four-handed form of Kshirodakshay Vishnu. But then, for those who have no faith in you, they will think that this form is very strange. So she is requesting the Lord, please make this form invisible to those who see with material eyes. So again, here in the shloka, Devaki is exhibiting her fear of harm coming to her child. On the one hand, she's saying, save and protect us. On the other hand, she's acknowledging that the Lord is indeed the Supreme Lord, meditated on by the yogis. And she's pleading with the Lord, this four-handed form has to go. O Madhusudana, because of your appearance, I am becoming more and more anxious in fear of Kamsa. Therefore, please arrange for that sinful Kamsa to be unable to understand that you have taken birth from my womb. She's requesting the Lord, do whatever it takes. Kamsa is going to know you are the eighth child. But you have to arrange for things in such a way that he will not recognize that you have actually come from my womb. She's referencing to the Lord as Madhusudana, the killer of the demon Madhu. Again, she is experiencing anxiety. She says, I don't want Kamsa to know that you have indeed appeared as the Supreme Lord. O my Lord, you are the all-pervading Supreme Personality of Godhead, and your transcendental four-armed form, holding conch shell, disc, club, and lotus, is unnatural for this world. Please withdraw this form and become just like a natural human's child so that I may try to hide you somewhere. So again, she's requesting the Lord, you know, if Kamsa comes and he sees you in this four-handed form, he's going to know already you are the Supreme Personality of Godhead. How can I protect you if you are visible in this way in your four-handed form? And if you read this particular purport, Prabhupada gives a beautiful explanation of the interaction between the devotee and the Supreme Lord. The devotee is experiencing anxiety that the Lord has revealed himself to be the Supreme Lord. He's come in full opulence. The devotee here wants to protect the Lord from the demon. But why did the Lord come in his four-handed form? Why did he not come as Krishna in his two-handed form to Devaki? We'll find out when the Lord begins to speak. At the time of devastation, the entire cosmos containing all created moving and non-moving entities enters your transcendental body and is held there without difficulty. But now this transcendental form has taken birth from my womb. People will not be able to believe this, and I shall become an object of ridicule. She's telling the Lord, nobody will believe me if I tell them, hey, do you know? Lord Vishnu, I gave birth to him. Imagine if she had to tell everybody, the four-handed Vishnu has appeared from my womb. So she is thinking, everybody will make fun of me if they find out that I gave birth to a four-handed Narayana. First of all, they'll not believe it. Second, they'll make fun of me. I will become the object of ridicule. So now the Lord begins to speak. The Supreme Personality of Godhead replied, my dear mother, best of the chaste, in your previous birth, in Swayambhuva millennium, you were known as Prishni and Vasudev, who was the most pious Prajapati, was named Sutapa. So the Lord is telling Devaki, This is not the first time I've come to you. In the Treta Yuga, in one of the Treta Yugas, I was your son. At that time, my dear Devaki Ma, your name was Prishni. At that time, my dear Vasudev, your name was Sutapa. When both of you were ordered by Lord Brahma to create progeny, you first underwent severe austerities by controlling your senses. So Sutapa is the son, one of the sons of Lord Brahma. And they were instructed to have children. And again, if you read this purport, Prabhupada writes, there is a very clear instruction for us. If you want to have a child, you must first observe some penances and austerities. You must first learn to control your senses. If the man and the woman have not learned to control their senses and have not performed any austerities, Prabhupada writes, they should not be having children. My dear father and mother, you endured rain, wind, strong sun, scorching heat and severe cold, suffering all sorts of inconvenience according to different seasons. By practicing pranayama to control the air within the body through yoga, and by eating only air and dry leaves fallen from the trees, you cleansed from your minds all dirty things. In this way, desiring a benediction from me, you worship me with peaceful minds. So, before anybody decides to procreate, your mind has to be clean. So first, you have to control your senses. Then you have to clean the filth from your mind if you want to procreate. That is, if you want to have nice, pious children. So the Lord is telling Devaki, in this way, desiring a benediction from me, you worship me with peaceful minds. Thus, you spent 12,000 celestial years performing difficult activities of tapasya in consciousness of me. Srila Prabhupada writes that Sutapa and Prishni were actually residing in the upper planetary systems. They were in the celestial planets. So there, 12,000 years is not a long time. Yet, they did observe severe tapasya, thinking about Lord Krishna. O sinless Mother Devaki, after the expiry of 12,000 celestial years in which you constantly contemplated me within the core of your heart with great faith, devotion, and austerity, I was very much satisfied with you. Since I am the best of all bestowers of benediction, I appeared in this same form as Krishna to ask you to take from me the benediction you desired. You then expressed your desire to have a son exactly like me. So at that time, the Lord is telling Devaki, I was so pleased with your austerity. I personally appeared before you in my original two-handed form as Krishna and asked you, what do you want? And what did you respond, Devaki? You said you wanted to have a son exactly like me. Well, there is nobody else exactly like Vishnu other than Vishnu. So the Lord himself had to appear. There is no exactly like. Being husband and wife, but always sonless, you were attracted by sexual desires by the influence of Deva Maya, transcendental love. You wanted to have me as your son. Therefore, you never desired to be liberated from this material world. Srila Prabhupada writes in this purport that Devaki and Vasudeva are actually pure devotees, but they had one desire. They wanted the Lord as their son. And because they wanted their Lord as their son, they chose to be husband and wife in multiple births with only one goal. The Lord has to come as a son. Srila Prabhupada writes in the purport, and he writes it so beautifully, Srila Prabhupada. He's giving an instruction to us, actually, if you read the purports. Srila Prabhupada says, we need not have, or we need not pray like Devaki and Sutapa, or observe any austerities to have the Lord as our son. That would be too difficult for us. And very sweetly, Srila Prabhupada says, only two things are needed for us to associate with Krishna: knowledge about Krishna and love for Krishna. And Srila Prabhupada says, we don't need to do any tapas like Mother Devaki and Vasudeva observed over 3 lifetimes. We can simply chant the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, and go back to Golok Vrindavan and associate with the Lord personally. We don't have to do any of this tapas. We just have to learn to love the Lord, to go back to Him, to serve Him in our original transcendental form and rasa. So the Lord continues, after you received that benediction and I disappeared, you engaged yourselves in sex to have a son like me, and I fulfilled your desire. So in that first birth, the Lord appears as Prishnigarbha. So as their son, he was known as Prishnigarbha. Since I found no one else as highly elevated as you in simplicity and other qualities of good character, I appeared in this world as Prishnigarbha, or one who is celebrated as having taken birth from Prishni. And the Lord is saying, in the next millennium, I again appeared from the two of you who appeared as my mother Aditi and my father Kashyapa. I was known as Upendra, and because of being a dwarf, I was also known as Vamana. So the Lord is saying, second time I came to you as a son. At that time, I was known as Upendra or Vamana. And you, my mother, were known as Aditi. And you, my father, were known as Kashyapa. If you read these two purports, Srila Prabhupada writes, both Prishnigarbha and Vamana are direct expansions of the Lord, but they are not Lord Krishna himself. They are partial expansions of the Lord. And I will go into a deeper meaning. Actually, we'll go into the purport very briefly to understand what Prabhupada explains, but we're going to go back to Shloka 31 to explain this. O supremely chaste mother, I, the same personality, have now appeared of you both as your son for the third time. Take my words as the truth. So now coming to the reason, why did the Lord appear in his four-handed form? If the Lord had appeared as Krishna, Devaki would not have believed that this was a supreme Lord. So the Lord was anxious to let Devaki know Yes, I am the Supreme Lord. You should be convinced of it. That is why I'm exhibiting this form. So you understand that I am the Supreme Lord. So he's saying, take my words as the truth. Had he appeared as Krishna, Devaki and Vasudeva would not have, perhaps the Lord is thinking, maybe they would have thought this is another ordinary child. If it is they saw an ordinary child, how will they be convinced that this 8th child is going to kill Kamsa? Therefore, he had to show to them that he has come to kill Kamsa. He had to reveal himself as the Supreme Lord. I have shown you this form of Vishnu just to remind you of my previous births. Otherwise, if I appeared like an ordinary human child, you would not believe that the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vishnu, has indeed appeared. And then the Lord gives them an instruction. Both of you, husband and wife, constantly think of me as your son, but always know that I am the Supreme Personality of Godhead. By thus thinking of me constantly with love and affection, you will achieve the highest perfection, returning home back to Godhead. So that means in their previous births, when they had the Lord as their son, they still were not liberated, although they are originally liberated souls. And in this context, we will read the purport to Shloka 31 and then come back. I will explain to you I will not explain to you. Srila Prabhupada will explain to you using Acharya's commentaries what is the progression that is happening here. In the 3 times that they've had the Lord as their son, what is the progression that is happening here? And this is coming from deep in the Shastras. So I have to locate let's read the purport. Pure devotees whose eyes are anointed with the ointment of prema, love, want to see the Supreme Personality of Godhead as Shyama Sundara, Muralidhara, with the flute swaying in his 2 hands. This is the form available to the inhabitants of Vrindavana, who are all in love with the Supreme Personality of Godhead as Shyama Sundara, not as Lord Vishnu. Narayana, who is worshipped in Vaikuntha, where the devotees admire his opulence. Although Devaki is not on the Vrindavan platform, she is near the Vrindavan platform. On the Vrindavan platform, the mother of Krishna is Mother Yashoda. And on the Mathura and Dwaraka platform, the mother of Krishna is Devaki. In Mathura and Dwaraka, the love for the Lord is mixed with appreciation of his opulence. But in Vrindavan, the opulence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is not exhibited. The Lord has just given an instruction to Devaki and Vasudeva, telling them, I am your son. And he's also hinting to them, I'm about to leave. Therefore, think of me all the time in separation. You will come back to me. But in Vrindavan, none of the residents of Vrindavan know Lord Vishnu, know that Krishna is Narayana or Lord Vishnu. They don't know. Therefore, Prabhupada is writing here that in Mathura and Dwaraka, the mother of Lord Krishna will always be Devaki, because she and Vasudeva worship the Lord in his form as Narayana. When your love for the Lord is mixed with appreciation for his opulence, you will always worship him as Narayana. But when your love for the Lord is so pure that you don't even see his opulence anymore, then you will worship him as Krishna, the 2-handed Krishna. Therefore, Prabhupada is writing, in Mathura and Dwaraka, The love for the Lord is mixed with appreciation of his opulence. But in Vrindavana, the opulence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is not exhibited. There are 5 stages of loving service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Shantaras, Dhasyaras, Sakyaras, Vatsalya, and Madhurya. Devaki is on the platform of Vatsalya. She wanted to deal with her eternal son Krishna in that stage of love, and therefore she wanted the Supreme Personality of Godhead to withdraw his opulent form of Vishnu. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur illuminates this fact very clearly in his explanation of this verse. Bhakti, Bhagavan, and Bhakta do not belong to the material world. This is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 14.26, where the Lord says, Mam chayo vyabhicharena bhakti yogena sevate sagunan samatityaitan brahma bhuyaya kalpate. What is the Lord telling Arjuna? One who engages in spiritual activities of unalloyed devotional service immediately transcends the modes of material nature and is elevated to the spiritual platform, which means you can experience Golok Vrindavan here when you're occupying this physical body, as long as you're practicing Krishna consciousness. From the very beginning of one's transactions in bhakti, one is situated on the transcendental platform. Vasudeva and Devaki, therefore, being situated in a completely pure devotional state, are beyond this material world and are not subject to material fear. In the transcendental world, however, because of your pure devotion, there is a similar conception of fear, which is due to intense love. So you could see that Mother Yashoda was always fearful that something would happen to Krishna. He was so naughty, he was so mischievous, she had to tie him up. And then after she ties him up, she thinks, if I release him, he'll get so angry, he's going to run into the forest and never come back. So she keeps him tied. So on the transcendental platform, you always have fear that you're going to lose the Lord, because you don't think of the Lord as the Lord. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, Bhaktyamam abhijanati yavan yaschasmi tatpataha. And as confirmed in Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhaktyaham ekaya grahyaha. Without bhakti, one cannot understand the spiritual situation of the Lord. Bhakti may be considered in 3 stages. So this is the explanation of the 3 births and why now Krishna is saying, you will come back. After you always think of me, Krishna is saying, you will come back to the eternal spiritual world. So there are 3 stages to bhakti. Bhakti may be considered in 3 stages called Guni Bhuta, Pradhani Bhuta, and Kevala. And according to these stages, there are 3 divisions which are called Jnana, Jnanamayi, and Rati or Prema. That is simple knowledge, love mixed with knowledge, and pure love. So when you associate with the Lord, if you simply know and accept that this is the Supreme Lord, that's one kind of bhakti. But when that knowledge is mixed with a little bit of love growing for the Lord, that is called Jnanamayi. But to enter the spiritual world, you need to reach that last stage called Rati or Prema or pure love for the Supreme Lord. So if you observe your own experience, initially, you don't know who the Supreme Lord is. You are simply being introduced to information about the Supreme Lord. The more information you gather about the Supreme Lord, the more you hear about the Supreme Lord, suddenly love develops along with that knowledge. And one day that knowledge will disappear and the only thing remaining will be pure love. At that time, you will enter Golok Vrindavan to go back to Lord Krishna. So Lord Krishna is telling them, now at least, always think of me. Enough of trying to get me as your son. Because to get me as your son, you have to be in the material planets. You were not seeking liberation, but I am telling you, get yourself liberated by always thinking about it. By simple knowledge, one can perceive transcendental bliss without variety. This perception is called manabhuti. When one comes to the stage of jnanamayi, one realizes the transcendental opulences of the personality of Godhead. But when one reaches pure love, one realizes the transcendental form of the Lord as Lord Krishna or Lord Rama. This is what is wanted. So Prabhupada is telling you and I, this is what is wanted. We want prema for Krishna. We don't want to be in Jnana stage. We don't want to be in Jnanamaya stage. We are gunning for prema stage. But then that has to happen organically. One cannot pretend to be in love with Krishna. That love develops over a period of time. Especially in the Madhurya Ras, one becomes attached to the personality of Godhead. Then loving transactions between the Lord and the devotee begin. Yeah. So we're going to go back now. So Krishna is saying, both of you, husband and wife, constantly think of me as your son. But always know that I am the Supreme Personality of Godhead. By thus thinking of me constantly with love and affection, you will achieve the highest perfection, returning home back to Godhead. Shukadev Goswami said, after thus instructing his father and mother, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, remained silent. In their presence, by his internal energy, he then transformed himself into a small human child. In other words, he transformed himself into his original form, Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam. So he became Krishna. Thereafter, exactly when Vasudeva, being inspired by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, was about to take the newborn child from the delivery room, Yoga Maya, the Lord's spiritual energy, took birth as the daughter of the wife of Maharaj Nanda. So again here, if you read the purport, Prabhupada mentions that other acharyas state simultaneously, Yashoda gave birth also to Krishna there, along with the girl child. So she actually gives birth to twins, but doesn't know that. So when this Krishna leaves from Mathura and goes to Gokul, they just merge. By the influence of Yoga Maya, all the doorkeepers fell fast asleep, their senses unable to work, and the other inhabitants of the house also fell deeply asleep. When the sun rises, the darkness automatically disappears. Similarly, when Vasudeva appeared, the closed doors, which were strongly pinned with iron and locked with iron chains, opened automatically. Since the clouds in the sky were mildly thundering and showering, Anantanag, an expansion of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, followed Vasudeva, beginning from the door, with hoods expanded to protect Vasudeva and the transcendental child. So, the servant of the Lord is always eager to serve the Lord. The servant of the Lord never likes to give up his service. So here, Anantashesh knows that his master is about to step out in the pouring rain. What does he do? He protects not just Vasudeva, but his eternal master, Lord Sri Krishna. So that's why when you see Vasudeva carrying Lord Krishna, you always see Anantashesh behind. And that is coming from Srimad Bhagavatam. Because of constant rain sent by the demigod Indra, The river Yamuna was filled with deep water, foaming about with fiercely whirling waves. But as the great Indian Ocean had formally given way to Lord Ramachandra, by allowing him to construct a bridge, the river Yamuna gave way to Vasudeva and allowed him to cross. When Vasudeva reached the house of Nanda Maharaj, he saw that all the cowherd men were fast asleep. Thus, he placed his own son on the bed of Yashoda, picked up her daughter, an expansion of Yogamaya, and then returned to his residence, the prison house of Kamsa. Vasudeva placed the female child on the bed of Devaki, bound his legs with iron shackles, and thus remained there as before. Exhausted by the labor of childbirth, Yashoda was overwhelmed with sleep and unable to understand what kind of child had been born to her. So, if you read these purports, Srila Prabhupada explains, if Vasudeva knew that Kamsa would come for Krishna, why was he willing to swap the child and bring harm to the female child of Nanda Maharaj? You could ask this question. Until I read the purport, I had never thought about this. What kind of personality is ready to protect his own child and allow another child to be harmed? And Prabhupada explains, this was because of Yogamaya's influence. Vasudeva was willing to do anything to protect Krishna, even if it meant the death of the daughter of his dear friend, Nanda Maharaj. Of course, the daughter herself is Yogamaya, the internal potency of the Lord. So we will stop here.